Hey there! Welcome back. Great to see you again for law number 13, plant the idea, don't push it. People believe more strongly in ideas they think are their own. If you haven't watched the previous episodes yet, please check the description. Otherwise, you will miss some important steps in this book. An idea is most vulnerable at the moment of its birth. Announce it too early and you expose it to forces it cannot yet withstand. Other people's doubts, pride, envy, misplaced advice, premature expectations, and, most insidious, the quick dopamine of applause that satisfies the ego before the work has earned anything. In strategy and in craft, restraint is not shyness, it is protection. Ideas need a greenhouse before they can face the weather. This is why the oldest wisdoms in the world caution against open mouths and open plans. The Spanish say, por la boca muere el pez. The fish dies by its mouth. English wartime posters warned, loose lips sink ships. The Portuguese echo it, en boca fechada no entran moscas. No flies enter a closed mouth. The Russian reminds you not to celebrate too soon. Don't say hop before you've jumped. And across East Asia, a proverb takes aim at premature visibility. The bird that sticks its head out is the first to be shot. Different cultures, one lesson: protect the fragile phase. There are several reasons silence outperforms early speech. The first is psychological. Announcing grand intentions can trick the mind into feeling it has already achieved something. Studies on identity goals show that public declarations grant a counterfeit sense of completion. Social recognition creates a reward that competes with the reward of finishing the work. The result is paradoxical. Talking replaces doing. A second reason is social. The moment you proclaim an intention, you invite a committee. People, often with good intentions, begin to push and pull your concept toward their preferences. Advice multiplies. Doubt travels faster than proof. In politics and in companies, early disclosure attracts rival claimants and subtle saboteurs. The moment a plan becomes visible, someone else begins measuring how to co-opt it or kill it. A third reason is strategic. Visibility sets expectations you do not yet control. If you must pivot, you appear inconsistent. If you must slow down, you appear weak. If you stumble, you have handed critics an easy narrative. Quiet work, by contrast, lets you iterate, improve, and even fail in private, converting missteps into momentum before anyone writes your story for you. There is also a logical economy to restraint. Talk expends social capital. Results earn it. When you spend capital before you have built it, you owe people updates, explanations, and concessions. When you deliver results first, you dictate terms. The difference is the difference between a promise and a precedent. Promises bind you to imaginary outcomes. Precedents bind others to real performance. In negotiation, a prototype on the table beats a pitch in the air. In leadership, a small working system commands more trust than a large set of slides. Show, don't tell is not a writer's cliché. It is the core of persuasive power. The discipline of silence also protects the idea's shape. Early in a project, you are still discovering its essential form: what to cut, what to keep, what to delay. Public discussion freezes a design too soon. Commentary hardens soft clay. In craft shops and elite engineering teams, the most reliable performers operate with tight loops. They build, test, and refine on short cycles inside a small circle that knows exactly what the standard is. Only after the core works do they widen the circle. This is not secrecy for secrecy's sake. It is control of entropy. The more eyes you invite, the more noise you introduce. The more noise, the less signal. Keep the loop tight until there is something worth amplifying. Silence is not isolation, however. It is a selective filter. The point is to choose your witnesses. A small council, people who have proved both competence and discretion, can prevent blind spots without diluting ownership. Think of this as your proof room. In that room, you do not promise, you test. You do not market, you measure. You do not seek praise, you hunt for failure points. When the results in that room are boringly reliable, you have something that can survive the wider world. The Japanese concept of the meaningful pause, applies here. The pause is not emptiness. It is structure. You are creating space in which the right adjustments can happen. There is an additional, often overlooked, benefit to keeping your counsel. You conserve narrative power. The first public telling of a thing determines how others will remember it. If you speak before you have results, you surrender authorship of that narrative to speculation. If you speak after you have results, you anchor the narrative in evidence. This is why the most formidable leaders and builders have a bias for unveiling rather than announcing. They do not beg belief, they stage it. The unveiling is a demonstration that collapses argument. A working bridge refutes every memo written against it. In relationships, too, silence buys credibility. Telling a partner, a team, or a client what you will one day become is a weak currency. Letting them experience the new standard makes rhetoric unnecessary. The strongest trust grows from repeated delivery, not repeated declarations. That is why the friend who simply appears at the door when needed is valued more than the friend who loudly proclaims loyalty. The maxim holds across domains. Keep your plans quiet, let your consistency speak. How then do you practice this without falling into secrecy that starves collaboration? Use 5 disciplines. First, set a private test that would count as proof even to a skeptic. A working prototype, a paying pilot, a resolved defect rate, a repeatable daily practice. Second, time box your silence. Commit to an interval, 30 days, 90 days, during which you will build, measure, and iterate without broadcasting. Third, define a tiny circle with explicit rules of confidentiality and clear decision rights. You are not avoiding feedback, you are curating it. Fourth, communicate milestones, not intentions, to the outside world. We've shipped version 0.9 to 10 users, not we're going to change the industry. Fifth, prepare the reveal as carefully as the work itself. The first public contact should be unmistakable evidence, not an argument. Your aim is not to excite an audience, you are setting a reference point that cannot be talked away. There will be temptations to violate this discipline. Praise is pleasant, attention is addictive, signaling ambition can open doors. Use a simple test. Will talking move the work forward faster than showing? If the honest answer is no, close your mouth and return to the bench. Remember the sayings that survived because they reflect reliable human failure. The fish is caught by its mouth. Flies do not enter a closed mouth. The first head up is the first head down. These are not calls for timidity, they are instructions for sequence. Do the work, then do the talking. When you finally do speak, speak briefly and precisely. Tie claims to demonstrated facts. Name the next test rather than the ultimate dream. By keeping your rhetoric proportionate to your evidence, you create an asymmetry. Others must argue against what already exists. You are free to keep improving it. Over time, this posture compounds. Your reputation shifts from the person with big ideas to the person whose ideas arrive as realities. That, in any field, is the highest form of persuasion. Guard the seed. Grow it out of sight. Bring the fruit to market. Then let the market talk for you. The greatest leaders in history rarely forced their ideas on people. Instead, they planted them carefully, like seeds dropped into fertile soil, and then waited to see which ones took root. The genius of this method lies in the subtlety. A command can provoke resistance, but a suggestion, delicately placed, makes people believe the thought is their own. Once they take ownership of it, they will defend it, nourish it, and carry it further than the originator ever could. Consider how great generals and statesmen operated. Julius Caesar did not tell his legions that they must love him. He gave them victories, shared their hardships, and let them feel they were part of his vision. In their hearts, they convinced themselves that loyalty to him was their own choice. That is the true art of planting an idea, shaping the environment, and then allowing others to step into the role you designed for them. The wealthy and powerful understand this instinctively. The tycoons of industry rarely build with their own hands. Instead, they create visions so compelling that others cannot help but devote themselves to the work. Henry Ford did not merely design machines, he instilled in his workers and investors the belief that they were part of a revolution, that they were democratizing mobility. The idea was not his alone, it became theirs. When the rich plant ideas, they are not seeking to hoard credit. They are shrewd enough to know that once people feel ownership, they will work harder, take greater risks, and stay loyal. To plant the idea is to delegate without appearing to delegate. It is to become the architect who lets others build the structure but still knows, in the end, whose blueprint it was. Philosophy and psychology both explain why this works. Human beings are naturally resistant to overt control. We rebel when we feel coerced. Yet we are also creatures of ego, and nothing flatters the ego more than believing an idea originated from within. When you plant an idea carefully, through suggestion, through framing, through silence even, you bypass resistance and awaken ownership. Ancient Chinese strategists spoke of this as guiding without pushing. The Stoics hinted at it when they reminded leaders to be patient, to wait for the right time rather than trying to force action. Planting an idea is less about imposing will and more about orchestrating perception. It is the art of invisibility, making others think the light is shining from within themselves when in truth you have only angled the mirror. The elite practitioner knows that the act of planting is not the end. It is only the beginning. Once the seed is dropped, you must watch how it grows. Who nurtures it? Who resists it? Who reshapes it into something more powerful than you first imagined? Leaders plant and then observe, knowing that the growth of the idea reveals the true loyalties and capabilities of their followers. A king who gives a vague suggestion and sees which courtier develops it most effectively is not just spreading influence, he is identifying his sharpest minds and most reliable allies. Wealthy patrons throughout history have done the same, commissioning artists, inventors, or thinkers with nothing more than a hint of a challenge, then watching who had the courage to bring it into being. And behind all of this lies the discipline of patience. Planting requires restraint. A poor leader blurts commands, a wise one withholds. A fool rushes to prove he is the source. The master lets others convince themselves they were. In Japanese proverbs, there is a saying that the bamboo that bends is stronger than the oak that resists. In the same way, ideas that bend into the minds of others, quietly, naturally, without force, endure longer than those hammered into place. Silence, suggestion, and timing are the gardener's tools of influence. He does not dig up the soil to check if the seed is sprouting. He trusts the process and tends the environment, knowing growth is inevitable if he has chosen well. This is why the rulers of empires and the builders of dynasties often appear calm, even detached. They know that their true work is not to shout, but to plant. Their authority comes not from endless exertion, but from the patience to wait as others carry the weight of the idea forward. To plant well is to rule invisibly, and in the end, the invisible hand always proves the most enduring. The cost of forcing ideas. History is filled with examples of brilliant minds undone not by a lack of vision, but by their inability to let that vision breathe and take root in others. Napoleon Bonaparte, for instance, was once a master at planting ideas subtly, inspiring loyalty through the perception that his men were carrying their own destiny into battle. Yet in his later years, intoxicated by power and impatient with resistance, he shifted from planting to forcing. He demanded obedience rather than cultivating ownership. The result was predictable. His once devoted allies began to view him as a tyrant. His armies grew weary, and his empire collapsed under the weight of his own urgency. The same lesson plays out in boardrooms and businesses today. A CEO who feels compelled to constantly remind everyone of his vision, who hammers it into presentations, emails, and speeches, usually signals not strength but insecurity. People begin to resist, not necessarily because they disagree, but because no one likes to feel pushed into compliance. Ideas spread most powerfully when others believe they are part of the discovery, not when they are told this is the way it must be. A leader who micromanages every thought and task suffocates initiative. In contrast, leaders who plant seeds and wait patiently watch their vision carried forward with more energy than they could ever command directly. Psychology calls this reactance, the natural human tendency to resist when we feel our freedom is being restricted. Tell someone they must believe in your idea, and their instinct will be to defend their independence, even if your idea is sound. But plant it gently. Leave it in the soil of conversation and allow them to come back to it later, and suddenly it feels like theirs. Ownership replaces resistance. This is why, even in daily life, we often lose influence not because our ideas are wrong, but because we present them with force rather than finesse. Consider family dynamics. The parent who insists on lecturing a child at every turn breeds quiet rebellion, while the parent who plants small suggestions and lets the child make discoveries earns true respect. Or friendships. The person who insists, "I told you so," loses credibility, while the one who quietly demonstrates wisdom through action allows others to recognize it in their own time. Even in relationships, partners who try to force every decision, every opinion, create friction. Those who let the other believe the conclusion was reached together maintain harmony and influence. The deeper truth is that forced ideas are fragile. They depend on pressure, repetition, and authority to survive. Planted ideas, however, grow roots inside the mind of others. They take on a life of their own. They expand, evolve, and strengthen precisely because the recipient believes they are self-chosen. This is the difference between manipulation that fails and influence that endures. The cost of forcing ideas is not merely rejection in the moment, it is long-term erosion of trust and credibility. Once people sense that your ideas come with chains rather than seeds, they stop listening, even when you are right. But when you master the art of planting and waiting, you transform ideas into movements, and movements into legacies. The greatest mistake most people make with ideas is believing that the power lies in the telling. They rush to announce what they've thought of, hungry for validation, but in that eagerness, they reveal their hand too early. An idea spoken before its time is like a seed dug up to prove it exists. The very act of exposure kills its chance to grow. Every culture has its own warnings about this. In the East, there is a saying that the fish dies because of its mouth, a reminder that loose talk leads to destruction. In the West, people say don't count your chickens before they hatch, another way of teaching that results matter far more than premature declarations. Across time and geography, wisdom converges on a single truth. Silence protects potential, while premature revelation invites sabotage, doubt, or outright theft. This is why leaders and strategists plant ideas, but rarely in the form of declarations. They do it through stories, metaphors, or even small symbolic actions that awaken something in others. A wise general might not order his men to fight harder. Instead, he tells a tale of their ancestors' bravery, planting the seed of courage without direct command. A visionary CEO might not dictate a new strategy, but instead poses a question in a meeting, watching how the team begins to wrestle with it until they feel the idea was theirs all along. This patience transforms the idea into a shared belief, not an imposed directive. The subtle planter never appears forceful, and because of that, their influence endures. The wealthy and powerful often understand this instinctively. They do not exhaust themselves executing every detail. Instead, they plant the seed, a vision, a phrase, an ambition, and then allow others to water it, nurture it, and expand it. Kings once spread their vision not through their own labor, but by inspiring loyalty in poets, priests, and generals who carried the idea forward. Modern billionaires rarely invent every product themselves. They whisper of possibilities, fund the soil, and let teams of engineers and marketers breathe life into the vision. What begins as a single thought becomes a movement precisely because it was not shouted but sown with care. The discipline required is immense. Human beings are wired for validation, for the thrill of hearing others praise an idea before it is born. But mastery requires resisting that urge. Instead of seeking early applause, the true strategist holds the silence, knowing that the applause means nothing without proof. It is better to show a result once than to speak of possibilities 1,000 times. The energy you save by not oversharing becomes fuel for execution. The clarity you maintain by not defending your idea in its infancy protects it from distortion. In this way, you gain two advantages at once. You preserve the purity of your vision, and you amplify its eventual impact when revealed as reality. Consider the contrast. A person who constantly proclaims what they will do versus one who quietly works and unveils the finished masterpiece. The first may gather temporary attention but loses credibility each time they fail to deliver. The second builds a reputation for inevitability. When they finally speak, people listen because history has proven that words are always followed by results. The psychology here is undeniable. Human beings trust patterns, and nothing is more powerful than the pattern of silence followed by undeniable proof. It conditions others to expect excellence without noise, which in itself becomes a form of authority. Thus, planting an idea is not about force, it is about restraint, patience, and observation. Once you have sown it, you must learn the art of waiting, watching how it germinates in the minds of others, allowing them to believe it was always partly theirs. That illusion is the true fertilizer of influence, for what people think they own, they defend with passion. To master this law is to become more than a thinker. It is to become a strategist of perception, ensuring your ideas are not just heard but lived, not just considered but carried forward by the very people you seek to guide. History rewards those who plant with patience and punishes those who speak too soon. Take the case of Alexander Graham Bell, who quietly worked on the telephone while others loudly proclaimed similar inventions. His silence, coupled with relentless execution, ensured that when he finally revealed his creation, the world was unprepared to contest him. His rivals had wasted energy in chatter. Bell had conserved his for proof. The result was not just recognition, but ownership of an entire industry. In contrast, think of countless inventors who announced their world-changing devices long before prototypes were ready. Most were forgotten, their ideas dismissed as dreams because the noise was greater than the outcome. The same principle operates in leadership. Abraham Lincoln, often seen as a man of patience, rarely revealed his full strategy. Instead, he planted ideas of unity, freedom, and perseverance in fragments, allowing people to wrestle with them until they took root. He did not hammer the Emancipation Proclamation into existence overnight. Rather, he floated the idea, tested reactions, and allowed the nation to prepare itself. By the time the proclamation arrived, it was not merely his decree, but a culmination of seeds planted across speeches, conversations, and careful silences. Leaders who push too quickly ignite resistance. Leaders who plant wisely create inevitability. Even in the world of wealth and business, silence carries enormous power. Warren Buffett often speaks in parables rather than direct strategies. He tells a story, drops a metaphor, and then lets investors and managers digest it. The wisdom grows in their minds, not through his insistence, but through their reflection. That is why his influence is not momentary, but generational. The most successful entrepreneurs do not storm the stage with noise. They release small visions and watch which ones capture imagination. Steve Jobs was a master of this. He did not reveal every plan Apple had. He teased, hinted, and let rumors build. By the time the iPhone appeared, people felt they had been part of the anticipation. He had planted desire long before unveiling the product. Psychology explains why this works so consistently. Human beings value what they discover themselves more than what is forced upon them. When you plant an idea subtly, people experience what psychologists call the endowment effect. They begin to feel ownership over the thought, as if it originated in their own minds. That is why a manager who allows employees to arrive at a solution he has already seeded gains loyalty, while one who dictates the answer gains resentment. The art is to guide without appearing to guide, to lead without appearing to push. This is not only strategy but also protection. Every idea, when fresh, is fragile. Neuroscience shows that the brain treats a new thought like a young sprout, easily influenced, easily reshaped, easily destroyed. Speak it aloud too early and it is exposed to criticism, jealousy, or dismissal. But keep it guarded, nurture it quietly, and it becomes strong enough to withstand attack. Just as farmers shield seedlings until they can endure the sun, strategists shield their visions until they can endure scrutiny. There is also a psychological warfare embedded in this law. By withholding your full hand, you unsettle others. Silence becomes a weapon, making people project their own fears, hopes, or assumptions onto you. When you do not reveal your ideas, rivals cannot attack them, skeptics cannot distort them, and doubters cannot sap your confidence. They are left guessing, and in that guessing, they reveal more about themselves than you reveal about yourself. Restraint flips the power dynamic. Instead of you seeking validation, others strain to predict and interpret your next move. On a personal level, even in love and relationships, this truth holds. A person who constantly declares affection without action soon loses credibility, while one who plants it subtly through gestures, silence, and consistency builds something unshakable. The lover who says little but shows much becomes magnetic. The one who announces endlessly but does little becomes hollow. Trust is grown, not proclaimed. Friendship works the same way. A true friend plants their loyalty in actions when no one is watching, so that when the time comes to say, "I've got your back," it is already known, already proven. Culturally, ancient wisdom has always pointed to this. In Japanese philosophy, the idea of ma, the power of the pause, the silent space between, teaches that meaning lies not in words alone, but in what is left unsaid. In African creation myths, the great silence precedes life, as if reminding humanity that creation first requires quiet preparation before sound and light emerge. Even in the sayings of everyday people, still waters run deep, silence is golden. We see a universal recognition. What is most powerful is often least spoken. The tactical lesson is simple but demanding. Plant, wait, observe, and reveal only through results. It requires mastering the hunger for attention and transforming it into the patience for proof. Those who do so not only safeguard their ideas, but also elevate them, for when the world finally sees, it cannot deny. The strategist who masters this law commands not just minds, but belief itself. History shows that not every seed of influence takes root as intended. One of the sharpest lessons comes from leaders who revealed too much too soon. Think of Thomas Edison during the War of Currents. While he had planted the idea that direct current was safe and reliable, he couldn't resist loudly attacking Nikola Tesla and Westinghouse's alternating current. Instead of letting the idea spread naturally, Edison overplayed his hand, electrocuting animals in public to prove his point, even supporting the first use of the electric chair. The spectacle backfired. His heavy-handed push exposed desperation rather than confidence, and AC eventually won. The lesson is simple. A seed must grow in the soil of others' minds. Forcing it only scorches the ground. A planted idea that looks like propaganda, arrogance, or fear turns people away instead of drawing them in. The deeper truth behind planting ideas is patience. A gardener knows he cannot tug on a seed to make it sprout faster. He can only tend the soil and wait for the right conditions. The same law applies to influence. You must plant subtly, nurture invisibly, and allow the other person to feel as though the growth is their own. Leaders who understand this wield disproportionate power because they never need to shout, "This was my idea." Their influence spreads silently, like roots beneath the earth, until one day the tree stands tall and everyone assumes it grew by nature itself. When you master this law, you move beyond persuasion into creation. You become the unseen architect of action, the invisible author of another's conviction. People defend and fight for what they believe is their own thought, never realizing it was whispered into them long before. All right, that's a wrap for part 13. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I appreciate your time and energy. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and keeps the content coming your way. And be sure to check out part 14, where we dive into Mirror Their World. Until then, take care and keep growing. See you in the next one.